Hey, I'm Ethan and I'm 22, finishing up my last year of college. Honestly, my life isn't that exciting. I study marketing work part-time at a gas station near my house and hang out with my best friend Liam whenever we have a spare minute. That's my routine schoolwork. Liam's place repeat. Liam and I have known each other since high school. He's like a brother to me, and his house feels like a second home. His mom, Heather, has always been there, polite, quiet, sometimes a little distant. I never gave her much thought beyond being Liam's mom, a woman around 42, working at a dental office, always neatly dressed, always composed. But everything changed in one sunny afternoon. I was driving back from the grocery store windows, down music low, when I passed Liam's house. Normally, I'd just glance over, maybe honk if Liam was outside, but this time my eyes caught something unexpected. Heather was out front washing her silver SUV, and for some reason the image froze me mid-thought. She wore a simple, faded gray tank top and jean shorts, clothes I'd seen women wear 1,000 times without noticing. But Heather looked different, effortlessly beautiful, oddly captivating. Her brown hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, a few loose strands falling onto her neck damp with sweat. Soap suds covered her arms, sparkling under the sunlight as they trailed to her elbows. As she moved, everything about her felt natural, unguarded, quietly powerful. I watched as she reached up, stretching slightly to scrub the roof muscles, lightly flexing, every motion confident. Then she leaned down, balancing on her toes, meticulously scrubbing the tire rims. There was nothing intentionally seductive about what she was doing, but my heart began to pound anyway, a feeling both unfamiliar and alarming. Heather didn't notice me as I slowly rolled past, completely absorbed in her task, oblivious to my stare. In that brief moment, she wasn't just Liam's mom. She was someone entirely different, with layers I'd never imagined, someone impossibly out of reach, yet fascinatingly close. I drove away, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary, trying to shake off whatever had just happened, to pretend the image of her wasn't seared into my memory. But it was too late. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed the scene over and over, questioning what had happened, why I couldn't stop thinking about Heather washing that car, and why it was suddenly impossible to see her as I had before. Heather had always been off limits, an unspoken boundary I'd never considered testing. But now I realized with a sinking feeling everything had shifted. The worst part was I knew I couldn't tell anyone, not Liam, not my other friends. Who would understand something like this? So I decided to keep it to myself, burying it deep, hoping it would fade with time. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The image of Heather, radiant in the afternoon sun, independent and serene, had changed something fundamental inside me. Whether I liked it or not, there was no going back. A few days later, I stood in Liam's bedroom, hands awkwardly in my pockets, waiting as he dug through his chaotic desk drawer for the second game controller. It was something I'd done 1,000 times, but today felt different, tense. The image of Heather washing her car lingered stubbornly in my mind, replaying at the most inconvenient moments. I was lost in that thought when footsteps drew my attention. I turned slightly and caught sight of Heather passing by in the hallway. She must have just stepped out of the shower. Her hair was damp, cascading loosely down her back, darker and heavier with moisture. She wore a simple thin t-shirt and long pajama pants that hung comfortably from her hips, casual home attire, but suddenly even something so ordinary felt strangely intimate. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, her voice gentle, familiar, but now carrying an undertone I couldn't quite place. "Hey, Heather," I replied, trying to sound normal, confident, but the slight tremble in my voice betrayed me. Her eyes hesitated on me for a fraction of a second longer than usual. In that tiny, seemingly insignificant moment, I felt a surge of panic. Did she know I'd seen her the other day? Had she felt my eyes lingering too long as she washed her car? I couldn't tell if her expression was curious, amused, or indifferent, and that uncertainty drove me crazy. Then just as quickly, she broke eye contact and moved past her footsteps, fading quietly down the stairs. "Found it!" Liam called out, jolting me from my thoughts, emerging triumphantly with the controller, oblivious to the confusion rattling inside me. We played our game, talked trash, laughed, everything as usual. But my focus kept slipping, my thoughts drifting down the hallway toward wherever Heather had disappeared. I was distracted by the faint sound of dishes being washed, the occasional gentle clink of a cup on the counter, imagining her hands moving swiftly, gracefully through her routine. From that day on, every time I went to Liam's house, it felt like stepping onto unfamiliar terrain. It wasn't anything Heather did deliberately. She still smiled politely, asked about school and work, acted exactly like Liam's mom always had. But I was different now. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. The delicate way she twisted her hair around her finger while drinking coffee, or how her voice dropped to a softer tone when tired after a long day at work. Every small gesture felt new, charged with hidden meaning that perhaps only existed in my head. One afternoon, while waiting for Liam to finish a phone call upstairs, I sat awkwardly on the couch, eyes drifting restlessly around the room. Heather was in the kitchen, tidying up her movements, calm and assured. I could see her clearly from where I sat, leaning over the sink, rinsing cups, the afternoon light gently touching her face, illuminating the quiet beauty I now associated exclusively with her. Suddenly, she glanced up and caught me staring. My pulse quickened. I tried to look away casually, but I knew she'd noticed. She didn't react dramatically, didn't look shocked or embarrassed, just a slight, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, and she returned to her work. The ambiguity of that moment haunted me. Was that smile just polite acknowledgement, or was there something else hidden beneath it? My mind raced to interpret every detail, every minor interaction we shared afterward. As days turned into weeks, my feelings grew more confusing, more tangled. At night, I lay awake wondering if what I was experiencing was even remotely acceptable. Heather was Liam's mom, my friend's mom, an unspoken line I'd crossed without meaning to. Yet the more I fought these emotions, the stronger they seemed to grow. Then came another evening at their place, this time for dinner. Liam was excitedly talking about a new video game he wanted us to try later. Heather sat across the table, quietly sipping her wine, occasionally laughing softly at her son's enthusiasm. In the gentle glow of the dining room lights, I couldn't stop glancing her way. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair loosely tied back, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. "You okay, Ethan?" Heather suddenly asked, startling me slightly. I realized I'd been openly staring, my fork frozen midway to my mouth. "Oh yeah, I'm fine," I quickly replied, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Liam didn't notice anything unusual, already absorbed back into his thoughts. But Heather's eyes lingered on mine, just a heartbeat longer, soft and curious before she looked away. Later that night, as I was about to leave, Heather caught me near the door. Liam had already gone upstairs to shower. "You've seemed distracted lately," she said gently, her tone almost protective. "Is everything all right?" I hesitated, heart pounding, unsure how to respond. "Yeah, everything's fine," I lied, forcing a smile. She nodded slowly, thoughtfully, her gaze searching mine as though she could see through my feeble deception. "Well, don't be a stranger," she said softly. "You're always welcome here." I stepped outside the cool night air, hitting my face, grateful for its calming effect. But as I drove away, her words echoed endlessly in my mind. "Don't be a stranger." Something in the way she said it, gentle, sincere, with a hidden meaning, made me realize my feelings might not be as one-sided or hidden as I thought. The boundary that had once been clear and unquestionable now seemed blurred, uncertain, dangerously inviting. It was just another evening at Liam's house, or it should have been. Liam had suddenly dashed out to help a friend whose car had broken down, leaving me sitting awkwardly in the living room, flipping absently through TV channels. My heart wasn't in it. My thoughts were already drifting toward Heather. I'd done my best to act normal around her since that awkward dinner exchange, but every moment around her felt like walking the edge of a cliff. One wrong step, and everything would collapse. Yet I couldn't keep my distance. Lost in these thoughts, I heard gentle footsteps coming down the stairs. My pulse quickened, though I tried to ignore the flutter of nerves. Heather entered holding a glass of red wine, her hair loose and casual around her shoulders, giving me a small, easy smile that made my chest tighten. "Liam had to run out," she asked, her voice smooth calm. "Yeah, some emergency," I replied, hoping I sounded casual and different, though my palms were sweating slightly. She nodded thoughtfully, sipping her wine. "Do you want something to drink? Water, juice, anything?" I hesitated, then managed. "Water would be good." She moved quietly into the kitchen, returned with a glass of cold water, handing it to me carefully, our fingers briefly touching. It was nothing, just a brief brush of skin, but it sent an electric shiver up my spine. She sat across from me on the sofa, keeping a respectful distance. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the TV's faint hum. It wasn't uncomfortable, but I struggled to find something to say. "How's school going?" she asked, breaking the silence gently. "You're almost done, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, just one more semester, then I'm thrown into the real world." She laughed softly. "Do you know what you want to do yet?" "Honestly, not really. I chose marketing because it seemed practical. But sometimes I wonder if that's enough. Heather looked at me thoughtfully, swirling the wine in her glass. "I understand. It's easy to pick what's safe, what's expected, but sometimes it feels like you're trading a piece of yourself away." I tilted my head, intrigued. "Did you always want to be a dental assistant?" She shook her head slowly, smiling sadly. "No, not at all. When I was your age, I wanted to study art, loved painting, drawing. But I got married early, had Liam soon after, and suddenly those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else." Her words hung quietly in the air, heavy with unspoken regret. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, not knowing what else to say. She met my gaze, a bittersweet smile on her lips. "It's okay. Life has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not. But there are things you let go of, and years later you realize how much you miss them." She paused, eyes fixed on her wine glass, lost in thought. The vulnerability in her voice tugged at something deep within me, something fragile and hidden. "Have you ever felt like that, Ethan?" she asked softly, "like you've let something important slip through your fingers?" Her question made my heart stutter. I opened my mouth and closed it, unsure how to respond. I knew exactly what I'd let slip away, or rather what I'd been trying to ignore. "I'm not sure." I finally said, words barely audible, throat tight. "Maybe." Heather watched me carefully, as if sensing something behind my hesitant answer. "You don't have to answer," she said gently. "Sometimes it's hard to recognize it until it's too late." We sat in silence after that, but it was different now, the quiet charged with everything neither of us could say aloud. I studied her silently, noticing how her eyes softened when deep in thought, the delicate lines around her mouth and eyes, beautiful evidence of a life lived with grace and resilience. I felt a sudden urge to reach out to bridge the small distance between us, to comfort her somehow, but I stayed still, paralyzed by uncertainty. "You're young, Ethan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You still have time to decide who you want to become. Just don't let fear choose for you." Her words resonated deeply. I glanced up, our eyes locking, holding a gaze that felt longer, more intense than any we'd shared before. My heart thudded painfully. For a second, it felt like she saw through every barrier I'd built. Then, as if aware of the dangerous territory we'd ventured into, Heather looked away, taking a slow, steadying sip of her wine. "You know," she said softly, steering us back to safer waters, "you're always welcome here, even after graduation. Liam would hate to lose touch with you." "I'd hate that too," I managed, voice thick with emotion. She smiled gently. "Good." Just then we heard Liam's car pull into the driveway, startling us both, breaking the fragile spell of our conversation. Heather stood slowly, smoothing her clothes, her composure returning instantly. "I'll let you boys catch up," she said, her voice back to its usual calm, steady self. But before she walked away, she turned slightly, giving me one last meaningful glance, soft, vulnerable, deeply honest. "Thanks for the talk, Ethan. I needed it." I nodded silently, unable to find the right words as she disappeared upstairs. A moment later, Liam burst through the door, launching into an animated story about the chaotic rescue he'd just performed. But I barely heard him. My mind was stuck on Heather, on the powerful conversation we'd shared. I realized I'd stepped into unfamiliar territory where my feelings had taken root and refused to let go. Nothing had truly happened between us yet. Something irreversible had shifted. Heather wasn't just Liam's mom anymore. She was someone who made me question everything I thought I knew about myself, my choices, the fragile boundaries I'd respected my whole life. And worst of all, I knew deep down I didn't want to go back. After that night, something shifted inside me. I found myself at Liam's house more often, not just to hang out, play games, or talk about school, but because I wanted to be around Heather. It wasn't intentional at first, or maybe it was, and I was convincing myself otherwise. But slowly these visits became routine. Liam was busier with his internship, often out late, or tied up with group projects, so I found myself alone at the house more frequently, sitting in the kitchen, chatting casually with Heather, or helping with small tasks, a leaky faucet, a loose cabinet door. Minor tasks became my excuse to stay close, to enjoy those quiet, unguarded moments. One afternoon, I was in the backyard with Heather sipping iced tea as the sun dipped lower. Liam had texted he'd be late again, and instead of heading home, I lingered. It felt easy to stay, especially when Heather smiled at me, her eyes bright yet tired, revealing subtle layers beneath her usual composure. "You don't have to keep waiting for Liam," she said softly, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I don't want you to feel obligated." "I don't mind," I replied honestly. "It's peaceful here." She laughed softly, tilting her head. "Peaceful, that's a nice way of putting it. Sometimes it just feels empty, especially with Liam growing up and pulling away." The loneliness in her voice touched something deep within me, stirring an urge to comfort her. She rarely talked openly about her feelings, always maintaining that calm facade. Now in this quiet backyard, she seemed vulnerable, genuine, reachable. "Is that hard?" I asked quietly. "Him growing up, I mean." Heather glanced away, eyes distant. "Yes, when you become a parent, you expect it, but when it happens, it catches you off guard. It feels like just yesterday he was small enough to hold in my arms." We sat quietly after that, sharing a comfortable, intimate silence. I wish the moment could last forever, knowing it couldn't, yet savoring every second. From then on, these moments became more frequent, drawing us closer. Heather slowly shared parts of herself she'd rarely exposed: her hurried youth dreams, sacrifice for early marriage, the painful realization that love wasn't always enough to sustain a family. She spoke candidly about the loneliness as Liam grew up, the quiet fear that her best years had slipped past unnoticed. I listened closely, fascinated, moved by every word. In these moments, I realized Heather was more than I'd imagined. Not just Liam's mom, not just a woman I'd begun to care about, but someone complicated, deeply real, mirroring my own insecurities, regrets, hopes. One evening, I was helping Heather sort through the garage, organizing boxes of old photos, Christmas decorations, relics of her past life. It was late, quiet, except for our soft conversation and the occasional creak of old wood. Liam was out again, just the two of us, sifting through memories. As Heather stood on a small ladder to place a box on a high shelf, her foot slipped suddenly, a balance faltering. Instinctively, I stepped forward, arms open. She fell softly into my chest, her warmth pressed briefly, intensely against me. My arms tightened protectively around her waist, holding her securely for a fleeting second. In that moment, the air changed. I felt her breath hitch, her heartbeat quickening against mine. We stayed frozen, both aware of the sudden closeness. I inhaled softly, her scent enveloping me, familiar, yet intoxicating. Slowly, Heather steadied herself, gently stepping back, cheeks flushed, lightly, eyes wide, searching my face with uncertainty. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I didn't." "It's okay." I interrupted quickly, the heart pounding furiously. "It happens." We stood in awkward silence, acutely aware of the invisible boundary we'd tested. Heather looked down, struggling to regain composure. I forced my breath to steady, though my pulse refused to slow. "Maybe we should finish this another day," she said quietly, tone guarded. I nodded, knowing it was best, though reluctant to leave this fragile moment behind. "Sure, whenever you want." From that day forward, Heather subtly began avoiding me, not overtly. She still greeted me politely when I came over, but the ease we'd shared vanished. She avoided direct eye contact, excused herself quickly. When Liam stepped away, maintained an invisible wall. The loss of that connection hurt deeply, a constant ache in my chest. I replayed that garage moment, endlessly wondering if I'd imagined the spark, or if she'd felt it too. Still, I kept returning to Liam's house, stubbornly holding on to hope that things might return to how they'd been. But every interaction was tinted with hesitation, regret. Heather would glance away quickly when our eyes met, the warmth we'd shared replaced by careful distance. One evening, just before leaving, I found her alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. My heart hammered nervously, yet determination pushed me forward. "Heather," I began quietly, struggling to find the right words. "About that day in the garage." She stiffened slightly, hands pausing mid-motion, shoulders rising with a cautious breath. "Ethan, it's probably best we don't." Please, I interrupted gently. Just let me finish. She nodded silently, eyes fixed on her clasped hands. I know you've been keeping your distance, and I understand why. I know it's complicated. Her gaze flickered nervously away, breath shallow. I've tried to forget everything, I admitted, voice trembling. Tried to move past it, pretend it never happened, but I can't. These feelings are real, Heather, whether we want them or not. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing a shaky breath. I know, Ethan. I feel it too, and that's why I've been avoiding you. My heart stuttered painfully. Hearing her acknowledge her feelings allowed a mix of relief and profound sadness. Heather, this isn't right, she continued, softly, voice filled with anguish. You're Liam's best friend. I'm his mother. Can you imagine how he'd feel if he found out? How would we explain it? There's no scenario where this works without hurting someone we both care about. Her words struck home, each cutting painfully deep. I'd known it all along, but hearing the truth laid out by Heather made it devastating. I understand, I replied slowly, voice thick with emotion. But ignoring this isn't working either. It's tearing me apart, Heather. I don't know how to handle it anymore. She raised her head, meeting my gaze directly, eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. Do you think it's easier for me? She whispered. Every time I see you, it reminds me of something I wish I could have, something always out of reach. But I can't act on these feelings, Ethan. It would be selfish, would destroy everything we both cherish. Silence enveloped us, filled only by the quiet ticking of the wall clock. I felt helpless, trapped between my emotions and the harsh reality we faced. What are we supposed to do then? I asked, desperation in my voice. Pretend none of this happened. Heather shook her head sadly. No, we can't pretend, but maybe acknowledging it openly is enough. Maybe it has to be enough. She stood slowly, taking a step closer. Eyes gentle, filled with longing and sorrow, reached out, hesitated, then softly touched my cheek with her fingertips. The brief contact sent a jolt through me, making it harder to breathe. Ethan, she whispered, voice trembling, you've brought something back to life in me I thought was gone forever. But we have to let this go, or we'll hurt the ones we love most, including each other. My chest tightened, throat constricting. I don't know how to just walk away from this, I admitted quietly, voice barely audible from you. Her eyes filled with tears, one slipping down her cheek. Neither do I, she whispered, but we have to try. She stepped back, withdrawing her touch, and in that painful moment, the invisible wall rose again, stronger, more impenetrable than ever. I knew we stood at an impossible crossroads, forced to choose between crossing an irreversible line or sacrificing our happiness to protect Liam, our friendship, the fragile balance we'd maintained. After a long, painful silence, I nodded slowly, understanding the choice we'd silently agreed upon despite the hurt. All right, Heather, I whispered, if that's what you want, I'll respect it. It's not what I want, she replied softly, voice breaking, but it's what we have to do. As I walked to the door, my heart felt unbearably heavy, weighed down by regret and unspoken truths. Heather stood quietly behind me, offering no further words, her silent presence speaking volumes. I stepped outside, pausing on the doorstep, turning back one last time, meeting her gaze, eyes filled with sorrow and unfulfilled longing. Neither of us said goodbye, it would have been too painful. But we knew this was the end of something important, beautiful yet impossible. As I walked to my car, a profound sense of loss settled over me, mixed with a painful yet necessary clarity. I'd grown through this, felt things, deeply learned about sacrifice, boundaries. Love in its complexities. It was heartbreaking, yet I knew that even if this chapter was closing, it had changed me forever. I started the engine not knowing what the future held, only that my heart would carry the memory of Heather and the impossible love we shared for the rest of my life. Ethan's story with Heather unveils a poignant lesson. Sometimes love demands sacrifice when it conflicts with loyalty and boundaries. A fleeting moment seeing Heather washing her car sparked an unexpected, forbidden attraction that reshaped Ethan's perspective. As their interactions grew from casual chats to a charged moment in the garage, Ethan grappled with feelings he couldn't ignore, yet knew were impossible. Heather's vulnerability, her dreams left behind, mirrored Ethan's own uncertainties, drawing them closer in shared unspoken longing. But her words, "We have to let this go or we'll hurt the ones we love," forced a painful truth protecting those we care about. Sometimes means letting go of what we desire most. Their choice to honor Liam's place in their lives, despite the ache, teaches us that love isn't just about following your heart, it's about weighing the cost to others. Ethan's journey, marked by restraint and heartbreak, shows that growth often comes through letting go, not holding on. This resonates deeply as we've all faced moments where duty trumped desire. Have you ever had to sacrifice something you wanted to protect someone else? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you've navigated life's tough choices. If this tale stirred your emotions, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join our community. Your support keeps these heartfelt stories alive, inspiring us to embrace life's complex lessons. Let's keep the conversation going.